Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Today we are focused on the fiscal year 2019 Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program Orientation webinar. We're going to talk about budget and grants management and the performance measurement through the performance measurement tool. Today is part of a two-part series of required orientation sessions for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program. We also will have grant category specific webinars that'll take place in December, so please look out for those. For Category 1, Category 2, and Category 3, we'll have separate webinars to help orient you to your new role. My name is Sarah Wurzberg, and I oversee training and technical assistance for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. We're the training and technical assistance provider through the Bureau of Justice Assistance. I'd like to give you an overview of the webinar today. First, we'll do an introduction of our panelists and a refresher on the Bureau of Justice Assistance and the Council of State Governments Justice Center, or CSG Justice Center. Then we'll have Nikisha Love from the Bureau of Justice Assistance Program Office discuss budget and grants management, followed by Gentry Schaefer, who works on the Performance Measurement Tool, or PMT. PMT is the required reporting for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant. At the end of the webinar, we will have time for questions and answers. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. Anytime during the webinar, you can ask questions by typing in a question in the Q&A box at the lower right-hand portion of your screen. This includes any type of question you might have that's technical or content related, or for any of the speakers. We're going to take all of those questions at the end of the webinar. If you encounter any technical or audio problems during the webinar, please call WebEx support at 1-866-229-3239. Please understand that there are some issues that we cannot fix during the course of the webinar. So we are recording the webinar, and we will post it on our website by the end of next week, so you all have access to it and you can share with other partners that are part of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant. We have a number of great speakers today. The first speaker is Maria Fryer, who is a policy advisor for justice systems and mental health at the Bureau of Justice Systems in the U.S. Department of Justice. She oversees the Justice and Behavioral Health portfolio and collaborates with the CSG Justice Center to assist states, local governments, and behavioral health organizations to better understand the relationship between criminal justice and mental health populations. She helps to create policy and programming that meets the needs of municipalities and the citizens they serve. Fryer previously worked for North Carolina Governor's Crime Control Coalition, where she advised the governor's office on effectively addressing the needs of victims of violent crime. In addition to working with families overcoming violence and instability in Coffee County, Alabama, Fryer has worked in community corrections in Fayetteville, North Carolina, helping to develop intermediate and community-based sanctions for repeat offenders with drug addiction. She also served in the United States Army as a member of the Military Police Corps. We also have Nikisha Love, who's a state policy advisor for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program at the Bureau of Justice Assistance at the U.S. Department of Justice. Nikisha Love has been with the Office of Justice Programs in the U.S. Department of Justice since 2008. She currently serves as a grants management specialist for the Bureau of Justice Assistance. In this role, she manages and provides guidance to the administration of the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program grant funding. Prior to joining BJA, Ms. Love worked in Community Capacity Development Office administering the Weed and Seed program, and as a grants management specialist at the Department of Health and Human Services, where she managed over 300 grants for the Office of Community Services and serves as the lead specialist for Assets for Independence, or AFI. We also have Gentry Schaefer, who is a research associate and consultant for the Department of Justice with Booz Allen and Hamilton, and is currently contracted with the U.S. Department of Justice to support the Performance Measurement Tool project. She has served at the local, state, and federal levels, leading civil, forensic, and criminal investigations, conducting criminal justice research and policy reform, as well as provided tactical support and intelligence to police and military command staff with the use of crime analysis and geographical profiling. Gentry is a member of the Metropolitan Police Department's Reserve Corps, where she volunteers as a police officer in the District of Columbia, and recently completed the Pilot Police for Tomorrow Fellowship at Georgetown University's Law Center on Innovative Policing. She holds a BA in Sociology from the University of Texas and an MA in Criminology and Criminal Justice from Sam Houston State University. Lastly, I am Sarah Wurzberg. I'm a Deputy Program Director for Behavioral Health at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. As I mentioned, I oversee training and technical assistance for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program and the Second Chance Act Co-occurring Disorder Program, which includes over 150 jurisdictions. I also oversee the substance addiction work across the divisions at my agency. I'm now going to turn it over to Maria Fryer to talk a bit about the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction of today's panel. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar and for participating. My name is Maria Fryer, and I'm a Policy Advisor for the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program, or JMHCP, in the Policy Office at the Bureau of Justice Assistance. You all heard a lot from me on the first JMHCP orientation webinar last week, and we're excited for those that are returning and for those that are just on to learn more. And we're here to provide all of you with additional information on budget, grants management, and performance measurement today. We hope the webinar answers some of the most commonly asked questions for new grantees. Again, a little bit about the Bureau of Justice Assistance. It is a component of the Office of Justice Programs, and we work to help make communities safer by strengthening the nation's criminal justice system through grants, training, and technical assistance, and policy development. And we provide services to state, local, and tribal governments with cutting-edge tools and best practices that they need to reduce violence and drug-related crime, support law enforcement, and combat victimization. And as recipients of this award, you each share a common goal to effectively serve people with mental illness and co-occurring disorders in your local jurisdictions and to help create positive system-wide change for people with mental illness in the justice system along many other professionals across the nation. For this webinar today, I'm excited to be joined by my colleague, Nikisha Love, from the Programs Office at BJA and Gentry, who supports the performance measurement tool and provide you some helpful information a little bit later on. So with this brief introduction, I will turn it back over to Sarah to talk a little bit more about the Council of State Governments Justice Center, and you'll hear more from me a little while later. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria. So the Council of State Governments Justice Center, or the CSG Justice Center, is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that combines the power of a membership association representing state officials in all three branches of government with the expertise of a policy and research team focused on assisting others to attain measurable results. Our staff develops research-driven strategies to increase public safety and strengthen communities. This slide describes a bit more about our work style and how we strive to reflect the Justice Center's core values, which are a commitment to being independent and nonpartisan in every aspect of our work, providing rigorous, trusted, high-quality analysis, developing practical and innovative solutions informed by data and research, promoting collaboration and consensus building, and being inclusive and respectful of diverse views and experiences. As an organization, we focus on a range of areas within the justice system. We pride ourselves in a deep understanding of experience with people on the front lines of the justice system and our ability to gather people from both sides of the aisle and across the country to foster collaboration. We promote effective policy and practice change through in-depth data analyses, on-the-ground training, direct assistance to state and local agencies, and dissemination of best practices. We've been lucky enough to serve as the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program Training and Technical Assistance Advisor since the beginning of JMHCP in 2008. We're certainly excited to continue our work with all of you. Just as a refresher, our role as training and technical assistance provider for JMHCP is really to focus on helping your grants succeed. You will receive a TA coach who will help support you in reaching your grant goals. If there are any changes to your programmatic design or budget issues, we will work with you to discuss this and in coordination with the Bureau of Justice Assistance. We'll support you through the planning and implementation processes in our guided format with our planning and implementation guides. We provide BJA with information on grantee progress and update them on the great work happening throughout the country. We do this through monthly calls with the BJA Programs and Policies Office to make sure everyone on the team is on the same page. Your TA coach will be reaching out to you by the end of the month. If you have any questions before then, you can feel free to contact me and I will do my best to answer all of your questions. But we are certainly looking forward to working with you all. Now I'm going to pass it over to Nikisha Love to talk about budget and grants management.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. My name is Nikisha Love, and I'm the grant manager for the JMHCP Grant Awards, along with Ms. Tracy Lee Williams. I would like to say congratulations to you all on receiving your 2019 JMHCP Award. Today we will discuss an overview of what is expected of you all as grant recipients from budget to grants management. I'm sorry. Where is this? Okay, so successful implementation depends on you having, of course, federal current registration, obtaining budget approval, proactively resolving any programmatic or budget issues, engaging in available resources when needed, and managing budget adjustment requests. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll do an overview of the budget and grants management. In this, we will speak of your special conditions, reporting, financial information, unallowable costs, procurement, subawards, and subrecipient monitoring. Next slide. For the budget and grants management overview, as you all see, there's a list of bullets here. We will discuss the FFATA, which is the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, grant adjustment notices, which we use, as we say, GANs, grant monitoring and compliance, and additional information and resources. Next slide, please. Okay. This section here gives you an overview of the grants management system. So this is where you will go into the grant management system to submit any grant adjustment notices. You will file your financial reports, your programmatic reports, any monitoring that's done, and you will also have to use this system when you're ready to close out the award. If you are having issues with usernames and passwords, please contact the GMS Help Desk. And just for an overview of how to navigate through the system, also reach out to the help desk for any of that information as well. Next slide, please. In this section here, we'll speak of immediate post-award actions. We ask that you carefully read your special conditions because a lot of those special conditions really require your attention because you may have programmatic and financial withholdings, which means that if you have certain withholdings that forbids you from obligating or expending any funds outside of any approvals, that can cause type of conflict, and, we will have to go back and try to resolve a lot of things. So we ask that you carefully read those special conditions and that you are in compliance. Also, for you all that have never taken the grants financial management training as of, I would say, for the 2017, because we're in 2019 now, that once you all accept the grant award, the POC and the FPOC, if you all have not already taken the training, need to complete that training within 120 days once you all have accepted the award. Next slide, please. This slide here just gives you an overview of what the special condition pages look like. So please familiarize yourselves with this page here of all the special conditions. Next slide, please. Okay. Speaking of the special conditions, as I stated, the special conditions are the terms and conditions of the grant award, which means that you have to adhere to those terms and conditions of the award. Some special conditions, like I said, are programmatic, program-specific, and you can have a withholding for misinformation, budget not being approved yet, and, additional documentation. So if you all have any questions, please reach out to myself or to Ms. Tracy Lee Williams, whichever one of us is your grant manager for the grant, so that we can help you resolve any issues that you may be having as far as what you need to submit to remove any programmatic withholdings, and if the budget has been cleared yet, and if not, what's the next steps. Next slide, please. Again, this is another overview of the special conditions. These here, again, we ask that you make sure that you are looking over the DOJ Grants Financial Guide, the use of federal funds, any audit requirements that, may be contingent to some of your awards, civil rights, equal opportunity, and reporting potential fraud, waste, and abuse. Next slide, please. And again, as I had stated, with the special conditions, grantees are responsible for adhering to all award special conditions. Consequences for noncompliance could include administrative or legal actions imposed on your organization by DOJ. So again, please make sure you all are reading those special conditions and that you are adhering to any of those terms. Next slide, please. Okay. As I was speaking of withholding special conditions that may be attached to, of course, mostly all of your awards, because some of them will include, we're still waiting for budget reviews and budget clearances. And again, some of them will have withholdings for programmatic documents that are needed. So just please familiarize yourself with these special conditions right here, which will prohibit you from being able to draw down or expend or obligate any funding. Next slide, please. So here's the overview of budget considerations for Category 1 grantees. Category 1 and 3 applicants have adequate funding to implement a data collection plan. So Category 1 applicants, you are to allocate a portion of the budget up to $100,000 of the total grant award to complete and submit the planning and implementation guide within 8 months of a final OJT budget approval. Program budget approval in coordination with your TTA coach are required to complete and submit the P&I guide. Now, we do know that sometimes it gets pushed a little beyond the 8 months, but please note that because it's letting you know that a certain portion has been allocated toward you completing that guide, that you can have a withholding of funds for the rest of the money until that guide has been completed. Next slide, please. Category 3 applicants should allocate a portion up to $150,000. So again, this is the same terms and conditions as Category 1. The only difference is you have $50,000 extra on top, but this one also states that this is 6 months instead of the 8 months as Category 1. So again, you know, once you submit everything and all withholdings have been released, then you will be able to have access to your full funding amount once the P&I guide has been submitted. And the process for that is you will work with your TA coach. Your TA coach will then approve it. You will submit it to myself or to Ms. Tracy Lee Williams, where we will review it and submit it on to policy. And once policy gives us the final approval, we will let you all know, because we will submit the GANs to remove those withholdings. Next slide, please. In this section here, we'll talk about progress reporting requirements. So for the performance management tool, which is the PMT, these reports are submitted on a quarterly basis. So which means you have to go in for like this one where it says reporting from January to March, which is due. So because these are due on a quarterly basis, you will submit these reports over into GMS, which is required for you to submit semi-annual. The only report that you will submit that will be a quarterly report into GMS will be that first report that is from October 1 up until December 31st of 2019. All reports after that will be submitted as semi-annual into GMS. So once you submit those reports in the PMT, you will then export those reports over into GMS. Next slide, please. So these are the financial reports, as we were speaking of reports that need to be submitted. Now, into GMS, the financial reports are submitted on a quarterly basis. So you have to submit those reports into GMS on a quarterly basis. Any reports that are not submitted in sufficient time will result in your funds being put on a freeze for delinquent reports. Next slide, please. Now, we're speaking of the FFATA reporting, which I had brought up in the beginning, which is the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act. This is required only if you have sub-recipients or your prime recipients that receive $25,000 or more of federal funding. So if you all have any sub-recipients that will be receiving $25,000 or more, you are required to report in the FFATA. Next slide, please. Okay, important reminders for submitting a SF-425. And this form here is for, this is the federal, the FSR. So as you see here, you have to report actual funds spent, not your drawdown amount from the federal government, which you actually spent. What's left for the recipient level, your match, if you need to report that, any income that you may have accumulated, any program income that you have accumulated needs to be put on there as well. So all costs, indirect costs, everything, and that's for the federal financial form. Next slide, please. And this section here gives you an overview of the financial information. Again, recipients agree to read and comply with the financial and administrative requirements set forth in the current edition of the DOJ Grants Financial Guide. So again, make sure you all are reading the DOJ Financial Guide, so that way you can get more information on what you can do and cannot do as far as what's allowable and what's not allowable. As you see here, what we have, to be allowable under the federal awards, costs must be responsible, applicable, and necessary to the project. Next slide, please. The financial management training that I had that I had referenced earlier was that, again, if you have not completed, this is from FY16 and beyond, but you should be doing your training, your financial training every 2 years. So if you have not completed the training in 2017, I suggest that you do. And if you're new to this, again, once you all have accepted the award, you have 120 days to complete the financial training. If the financial the FPLC has not completed it within 120 days, as well as the PLC has not completed the training within 120 days, your award is subject for a withholding of funds until that condition has been satisfied. Next slide, please. And this page here just gives you important resource information, again, with the DOJ Financial Guide. You have the Grant Application Resource Guide and the Uniform Administrative Requirements. Next slide, please. Unallowable costs, which I was speaking in reference to. As I said, get familiarized with the DOJ Financial Guide, because these costs right here, if you all have these or you were considering these, now you know that these costs are unallowable under the JMHCP award, which is prizes, rewards, entertainments, trinkets, client stipends, gift cards, vehicles, costs that do not support approved project activities, entertainment, food and beverage, costs incurred outside of the project period. So which means that you cannot have any costs that was not effective as October 1, the start of the award. But again, you should not be obligating any funds or expending any funds if you all have not received an approved budget and if all special conditions have not been removed. Next slide, please. Okay. At this time, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So we're actually going to move forward, and I believe that Maria is going to take over at this point.
All right. Great. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Nikisha. That's a lot of information to take in. And I think just getting started and actually going to some of these systems and clicking on the links and getting familiarized with the process certainly helps. So as I mentioned, I work in the policy division at BJA. We oversee the justice and mental health portfolio and help to guide mental health policy that supports evidence-based practices. And I can help to answer programmatic and policy questions related to justice and mental health and co-occurring substance use disorders. For example, I review these planning and implementation guides that Nikisha talked about, and I review the content within those guides, and I work with the program office to approve the guides and then release implementation funds. So once the planning portion of your project is complete and you're ready to implement, we go ahead and release the funds, and Nikisha submits a GAN, and then you can move forward once everyone's in agreement. So I work with the TA provider as well to support the conversations on the larger scope and the changes that will occur within the project. So in my role, I work closely with both the programs office and the CSG Justice Center, and we try to stay as coordinated as possible to make it easy for JMHCP grantees. And we're a very small staff. There's a lot more of you than there are of us. So when problems do arise, we try to provide as much support in the way of links and resource guides as possible. But then after those resources are exhausted and you still have questions or you're still stuck, definitely please reach out. Don't let it go too long, and we'll get together and we'll figure out how we can help you. Certainly your TA coach is your first line of support. The policy office also provides strategic direction and policy leadership. We focus on what works, We promote evidence-based approaches such as the risk, needs, and responsivity model, and best practices for working with people with co-occurring disorders in the justice system. We support selecting the awards and actually the grant-making process. I oversee the technical assistance that's provided by the CSG Justice Center and all the work that they engage in to provide JMHCP grantees the best possible technical assistance support, and they do a wonderful job, and we've been really happy, and they're extremely responsive to grantees in the field. So just let them know what your needs are, and they are there for you. We work to move the field forward through translating research into best practice, and we support curriculum development and the delivery of that curriculum, such as crisis intervention team training and curriculum support for local jurisdictions as they develop police and mental health partnerships in responding to people with mental illness. And through JMHCP, I oversee a national resource center for justice and mental health jurisdictions. So jurisdictions in your area that do not have JMHCP grants but need assistance in how they coordinate and collaborate response to people with mental illness, there are resources there as well. So for anybody that's on the call today, you might be a JMHCP grantee. If you're not a JMHCP grantee or you know someone that needs help in this area, please reach out as well, because we do have some national expertise at the Council of State Governments Justice Center that can assist with that, even if you're not a grant recipient. So that's really important to let everybody know on the call today. So now I'm going to pass it back over to Nikisha, answer some key questions for new JMHCP awardees on budget categories and the budget narrative, as well as the budget detail worksheet. Nikisha?
Thank you, Maria.
Sure.
Okay. So in this section, we're going to, like as Maria stated, we're going to discuss the budget overview, the categories, the narrative, the detailed worksheet, and your match. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is, okay. The next slide. Okay. On this slide here is the use of standard budget categories and format, which I'm pretty sure you all are familiar with as far as personnel, fringe, travel, equipment, supplies, contractual, other, and indirect costs, which all consist of the budget. Next slide, please. So for personnel, this is just a standard budget of what is looked for when you're doing your budget, to make sure that you list each position, the title, name of the employee, if it's applicable, show the annual salary rate at the percentage in time, and then the compensation paid for the employees engaged in the grant. So once you set everything up and you give us the computation, that should give us the cost. And most of the time, we find that when people are doing the budget, that they don't give us a full breakdown of everything, which can hold up the budget process and getting your budget approved. Next slide, please. Again, this is an overview of the fringe benefits, just the same as personnel costs. Next slide, please. Travel costs should be for employees only, not for consultants or your contractors. Only employee travel should be listed in travel. Anything outside of that should be listed in subawards or contractual. Next slide, please. Equipment, again, same. You give us the breakdown of the items, the computation, and the cost. Next slide, please. That's the same as for supplies. You all should break out the supplies instead of saying et cetera, because most of the time we need to know what et cetera is. Like, you need to give us detailed information of what supplies you all will be using for the grant. And again, these should be supplies that are for the employees of the award. Next slide, please. Construction, we should have no cost for construction with this grant. Next slide, please. In this section, what I was speaking of, like if you all are going to use any travel for your consultants or your contractors, it should go in this section here under consultant and contracts. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And this is for the subawards and your subrecipients, the same as I stated for the contracts. Next slide, please. And this here is just some additional information for guidance on subawards and contracts. If you all are trying to differentiate between the two, then this is the information that you can go to look at to see what consists of a subaward and what consists of a contract. Next slide, please. Other costs. In this category for other costs, which it should be other costs where we have rent, reproduction, telephone, janitorial, security services, investigative and confidential funds, which we should not have any confidential funds. And also, under this section, if you do have travel for employees that consist of registration costs should not be in travel. It should be in other cost category. Next slide, please. In this section here, we speak of indirect costs. So for anyone that is claiming indirect costs, you want to make sure that you do have a federal approved indirect cost rate. If this is your first time, you've never had an indirect cost rate, and you want to go the de minimis rate, which is the 10%, you may do so. But if you had a federal approved indirect cost rate agreement and for some reason you all have not gotten it updated or you all have not renewed it, you cannot come in and claim a de minimis rate of the 10%. This is only for recipients that have not ever received a federal approved indirect cost rate. Next slide, please. And this section, it speaks on your match requirements. It gives you a breakdown, and this is the first year where we have the breakdown of for year 1 and 2 at the 60%, and then in year 3 at the 75%. So this section here should allow you to get familiarized with this. And I know that we're probably going to have a lot of questions on the match requirement, given that the way it has been broken down in a percentage rate. Please know that, again, this is new to us, and we are working to get all of the information needed for any of you, the recipients, that when it's time for you all to come in for that third year, or if you're coming in for a no-cost extension, we will be able to address it better at that time. Next slide, please. And this section here, it shows you how the match is calculated, which means that if your award, for example, is for $200,000, so you would divide that by 80%, which will give you the $250, and then you would times that by your required percentage. So if the required percentage is the 20%, because that's based off the 80%. So again, given how the awards are broken down this time, instead of the 80%, you would have to calculate that by whatever that percentage would be. If it would be a 60% or that 75% times whatever your portion would be to give that whole 100%. From us, our percentage was DOJ, and then you as the applicant, your percentage that is needed to equal that 100%. Next slide, please. This is a budget narrative worksheet. This is just an example of what a budget narrative should look like. It should be clear, consistent, with all of the information, the purpose, the process, and the outcome. Next slide, please. Budget clearance issues. Next slide, please. Okay. So here we will speak of the top 10 reasons budgets do not clear. One, as I was pointing out, your budget detail worksheet is missing, which means that you probably have given us a narrative, but not a detailed worksheet where you are able to break out the cost for each one of those cost items, which the budget detail worksheet will have the computation, which is not correct, as I stated, because we don't have enough information. Your match percentage requirement, again, based off of the calculations that is given in this slide, is what you need to use when you're doing your match calculations. And also, please remember that match is subject to the same requirements as federal funds as well. You all have unallowable costs within the budget, and then again, as stated, some of the costs require breakdown, which means that you have to give us an actual breakdown of that cost for that category. So when you're looking over your budgets, just make sure that, again, you're giving us a consistent budget that also mirrors your budget narrative, that can also equal up to the summary for your 3 years, however many years that the award is for. Next slide, please. Number 6 is incomplete budget narrative. As I stated, you may do a worksheet where you give us the calculations, but fail to give us the narrative of how these costs are going to work within your program. Your financial management internal control questionnaire form was not submitted during the application process. So if that is the case, then you all would need to get that done and get it submitted. Prior budget did not clear, again, because we're still reviewing budgets, not just us, but OCFO. So this is one of the reasons. A currently federal approved indirect cost rate negotiated agreement has not been submitted. So again, if you're claiming indirect costs, please make sure that you all have submitted an indirect cost rate agreement that is active. And responses to initial budget financial review memo were insufficient. So the initial review, speaking on number 10, the responses to the initial review, this is when OCFO has completed their first review of your budget, and they've made notations and contacted either myself or Tracy Lee Williams for the financial findings. And then we submit that information to you all to get back to us, but the information was still insufficient. It did not meet the objectives of those items that were found during the financial review. So please make sure when we are reaching out to you for budget follow-up questions that we need you all to make, is that you're making sure that you are adjusting costs that need to be adjusted or anything that needs to be done as the financial management points out, because we can, you can send us a budget and we can send it in, and then it keeps coming back. So we just need to make sure everything is addressed as the financial manager will want it. Next slide, please. Supplanting. DOJ funds must be used to supplement existing funds for program activities and may not replace non-federal funds that have been appropriated for the same purpose. So, as this statement is letting you all know that you cannot, use our funds to replace or supplement, which will be supplanting issue, for the same purposes if you already had approved funds for that. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, this speaks on supplanting as far as personnel and fringe benefits are most often involved in potential supplanting. This is just an example of where it says funds are appropriated for an employee. Federal funds are awarded for the same purpose. The agency then replaces its funds with the federal funds, reducing the local funds used for the employee. This will result in supplanting, and the federal cost will be unallowable. So please make sure that you all are not doing any supplanting. Next slide, please. Changes to the award. Next slide, please. Okay, any changes to the award, which would be, as I spoke to you all early on, grant adjustment notices. A grant adjustment notices, as we say, GANs, is used to request if you want to do a project change, which will probably come in a couple of years later because of whatever issues that you may were having during the startup, whether it was the budget wasn't approved in time or other things that may have transpired during the life of the grant. Then you will come in to request extended time for your grant award. Next slide, please. And these are just the different types of GANs that you can submit, which will be submitted through the GMS system, which is budget modifications, change of scope, no cost extensions, what I was speaking in reference of when you want to come in and request an extension on your grant. Your point of contact information and the removal of any special conditions, sole source, cost requiring prior approval. Now, with the point of contact information, we ask that anytime roads change, that you make sure that point of contact information is always up to date with the current information of the person who will be implementing the grant project. And that's the same as if it's the authorized official, we would need to make sure that information is up to date, just as well as the financial points of contact also. And please note that anytime you make changes to any of those roles as far as the FPOC and the POC, if you all have not completed the grants financial management training, that is still a requirement anytime someone is added in any of those roles. Next slide, please. Again, this is the GANs changes to the award. Like we spoke in reference to the change in scope of project or a no-cost extension. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay. So this here speaks on if you submitted a GAN for a change to your project scope, prior approval is needed when these changes include altering programmatic activities, modifying the purpose of the project, changing the project site, the target population, and your sub-grantee or your contract, which means that before you start to think about changing the scope of your project, you should get with your TTA coach that they can assist you with that. So that way, if you do need to change the scope of the project, I or Tracy will be aware of this, and this information has also been relayed to Maria in policy. Next slide, please. Budget modification GAN. In this section here, and this is only for new grants right now, as far as your budget, you cannot submit a budget modification GAN as of right now if you have not received an approved budget. Now, for future references, once your budget has been approved and you need to submit a budget modification, then you would, of course, go into GMS and submit budget modification. And the rule is, if it's the 10% rule, which states that if it's not more than 10%, that you're moving between approved budget categories, which means that these budget categories have already been approved and you're not zeroing out a category, because if you zero out one category, then you will have to submit an official budget modification GAN. Now, although you don't have to submit if you're doing the 10% rule, but I strongly encourage you all to submit a program office approval GAN, only because it gives you an actual record and a trace of what you're doing with your project, in case if someone leaves and someone has to take on those duties, that information will be accessed in GMS. Next slide, please. Additional considerations. Next slide, please. Okay. I spoke in reference to you all earlier about the reports as far as the FFR, which is the Federal Financial Report, which is the FS4225, which you will have to submit in GMS. It's the same as the progress reports will go in GMS, and the PMT reports you will submit in PMT quarterly. And those quarterly reports that you submit in the PMT will then be uploaded into GMS as your semi-annual progress report. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this section, we speak of the pass-through entity responsibilities, as I had explained earlier when I had made the statement that if you all have subrecipients that you all will be given $25,000 or more to, that you have to report them in the FFATA, which is the Federal Funding, Accountability, and Transparency Act. So you must have established written policies and procedures for subrecipient monitoring, evaluate each subrecipient's risk for noncompliance with federal statutes, regulations, and terms and conditions of the subaward, advise of any supplemental requirements imposed by the pass-through entity. So if you all do have subrecipients, as the recipient of this grant award, you will be responsible for making sure that you have all of these things in place. Again, with the written policies and procedures, and you will have to monitor your subrecipients. Next slide, please. Okay, as I was stating, monitoring your subrecipients. In this section here, it says selecting and monitoring subrecipients. If you are making subawards, you as the recipient must require a subrecipient to comply with all applicable special conditions and restrictions included in the OJP award, including all pass-through requirements. And this is the information here that you all would need to make sure that they are following and that you are following if you're doing pass-through. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Okay. Grant closeouts. So once you all have completed your grant award and you're not coming in for an extension, that you're ready to close out the award, instead of the normal 30 days that you all have to submit reports and submit everything into GMS, you have 90 days when it's the closeout because you have your liquidation period. And please note that you cannot have any activities outside of the grant award. So if your grant expires on 9/30/2020, you cannot already have an event scheduled after that. Next slide, please. 5 grant closeout requirements. The first one is make sure you submit your financial progress report as well as your federal financial report, that you all have made sure all special conditions have been complied. Financial reconciliation, programmatic requirement certification. Now, usually for number 4 and 5, you all would not have to worry about that because the financial reconciliation would happen with OCFO, and the programmatic requirement certification is usually taken care of by myself or Tracy. Next slide, please. Okay, BJA Compliance and Monitoring. As a recipient of a grant award, you all are subject to monitoring, whether it's on-site or whether we have to schedule a desk review. Again, as a recipient, you all are subject to be monitored for any grant activities. So is anything conducting activities that were proposed and approved, meeting programmatic, administrative, and financial requirements, identifying and resolving problems and or issues, and receiving any TA or guidance. Next slide, please. If you all require any additional information, here are resource numbers for the BJA main phone number, my number, which is here, and my email address, as long as with Tracy Lee Williams' phone number and email address. Next slide. Is that it for me? And here are any other important links that you all may need to access. We have GMS, the BJA performance tools, because if you don't have an award already, so this will be good now for you all to go ahead and start contacting these different systems so that you all can have your username and passwords and start learning how to navigate through the system. Next slide, please. Okay, so this concludes my session. And once again, on behalf of myself and the BJA programs, we say congratulations to you all for your 2019 Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Award. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikisha. That was such a thorough rundown of the information. I know that the grantees appreciate it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gentry, who's going to talk about the performance measurement tool.
Hi. At the end of this section of the training, you should walk away with a better understanding of why BJA requires you to report performance measures and how we use this information. During the training, you'll get an in-depth review of your program-specific reporting and some issues we see in reporting. So let's get started. So what exactly is the PMT? The Performance Measurement Tool is the online data collection tool for the Office of Justice Programs grant recipients. It is structured as an online questionnaire and is available year-round. The PMT contains a lot of information and many tools to assist you in your reporting. So let's take a look. This table outlines the type of data you'll be reporting on each reporting period, when your reports are due in the PMT, and whether you also need to upload your reports to GMS. As you can see from the alternating values under the second column, you'll only report on the narrative questions in January, July, and during your last reporting period of grant activity, regardless of where that falls on the schedule. As you can see from the table, the PMT is only open for data entry during the month after a reporting period closes. The PMT is accessible year-round for you to review and edit your data, generate reports, and more, but you will need to contact the PMT help desk to help you unlock reports as needed. The first page of each performance measure questionnaire outlines additional resources that may be helpful as you report. It includes reminders about the program's goals and objectives and lists contact information for the PMT help desk and state policy advisors if you need to reach out with any questions. We'd like to note each program's goals and objectives as a reminder of why we're asking you to fill out these questionnaires each quarter. The measures are ultimately there to assess your progress towards the JMHCP program's goal. We also have a reporting tip on this slide. These reporting tips may appear throughout the presentation where we think there's an additional information that can help clarify PMT reporting. This one highlights that some grantees find it easier to track the required data outside of the PMT in smaller time increments, maybe by week or month, and then add it all together when it's time to report in the PMT to get their reporting period totals. We strongly encourage you to use whatever approach makes it easiest for you to report your totals each reporting period. Inputs refer to program resources. Examples include grant funding, like where we ask about your program's funding allocations by program activities, and personnel, which we get through a variety of questions about cross-sector partners and community participation. Activities are the actions that convert inputs to outputs that eventually result in measurable progress towards the program's goals. These can include things like trainings, meetings, partnership development, data analysis, and strategic planning. Outputs are the countable products or services that result from these actions. And outcomes speak to longer-term program goals. Associated outcomes can be found in the outcome section at the end of the performance measure questionnaire. With all that in mind, let's look at the goals of the JMHCP program as defined in the fiscal year 2019 solicitation. I've highlighted a few key components of the goal statement here. Performance measures benefit both BJA and its grantees. This slide focuses on performance measures' uses and advantages for BJA, which uses this information to identify areas of success and potential opportunities for improvement, track grant process towards program goals, understand how funds are distributed, and comply with the Government Performance and Results Modernization Act. Grantees can use performance measures to accomplish many of the same goals, like identifying areas for improvement to focus internal efforts, proactively request assistance to address challenges, and develop evidence of program process that can be used to enhance advocacy and sustainability. Now, let's get into the functions of the performance measurement tool. The JMHCP Performance Measures Questionnaire is structured with 3 different types of questions: multiple choice, multiple response, and open text. Multiple choice questions allow grantees to select the response that best reflects their project activities. With multiple response questions, grantees can select all responses that reflect their activity. Open text questions enable grantees to enter both text and numbers to provide contextualized responses when appropriate. There are 3 main functions of the questionnaire: baseline, carry forward, and skip flow. Baseline questions collect information on activity before your grant becomes operational to enable pre- and post-grant comparisons. Carry forward questions reduce reporting burden by not requiring you to enter, but allowing you to update responses to questions where information is likely to remain stable. Skip flow questions reduce reporting burden by allowing you to skip sets of questions that are not applicable to your project. As mentioned in the earlier part of this training, the questions in the PMT are made up of two main categories. The first is the quantitative program performance measures. This is where you enter the numeric data you collected over the course of the reporting period. For example, how many dollars were spent on law enforcement equipment during this reporting period? The second section are qualitative narrative questions. These questions are open-ended and do not require a numeric response. The narrative questions that are answered during the April to June and October to December reporting periods fall into this category. As an example of this type of question, you could be asked, what type of equipment was purchased with BJA funding during this reporting period? Remember, these questions are meant to capture the full experience you have with conducting activities with BJA funds. So the more information you provide, the better. The quantitative data you report is used to establish baselines, track performance against program goals, and create a nationwide picture of numeric data for BJA. Narrative questions are open-ended and give grantees a chance to express in their own words how their experience has been conducting program activities with BJA funding. Both of these categories are equally important for your reporting, and you should take every possible measure to ensure the accuracy and integrity of your data. All grantees need to report data for the core performance measures subset. These are used by leadership to measure the success of certain program goals. Here's one example of a core performance measure. Now, let's discuss some common reporting challenges. To introduce this section, we'd like to share some information about how BJA identifies common challenges and seeks to improve data quality. BJA's Planning, Performance, and Impact team assesses data consistency and accuracy and reaches out to grantees with potential issues. Program grant managers also play a role in enhancing performance data quality through site visits, where they identify documentation to verify PMT data entries for major activities. Grantees are required to provide a response to all mandatory measures. However, if a mandatory measure does not apply to the activities funded by your award, we ask that you enter 0 and then provide an explanation in the additional comments section once your report is complete. Upon viewing your complete report, you can select the blue Add Comments box. This will allow you to submit additional comments to explain why you're not able to provide data. A brief description such as, we are still in our planning period, or there was no activity during the reporting period, are sufficient responses. This information provides data quality and helps us understand the meaning of zeros reported in the system. Many of the questions in JMHCP's performance measure questionnaire are related. During the data verification process, analysts examine related questions to ensure sites are reporting consistently. Take question 29E, for example. If you report that 12 people involved in a mental health crisis were taken to an offsite agency or facility, then the sum of questions 30A through 30E, which lists the different types of offsite options, must equal 12. To wrap up, we'd like to quickly review common challenges with defining goals and objectives and offer a few tips. It's important to write well-defined goals and objectives to clarify your priorities and highlight criteria for success. The SMART mnemonic walks users through an important dimension of a good goal or objective. They should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. We recommend that you reevaluate your goals twice a year to determine whether they should be updated and use data to drive this process. I'll leave you with a few examples of how to create strong goals before Sarah closes us out with a Q&A section.
Thank you so much, Gentry, and thank you to Maria and Nikisha as well. This has been a really informative webinar. We did receive a few questions, but just as a reminder, there's a question and answer box at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have any questions, please chat them in now, and I'll go through the questions that have already been asked by the group. To begin with, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows that this webinar was recorded, and a draft of the PowerPoint slide deck will be available on our website in about a week. And you also should hear from your TA coach, who can send you a link to that as well by the end of the month. So the first question was about the Category 1 planning phase. This person wanted to confirm that the Category 1 planning phase is limited to $100,000. So I can answer that. For this year in the solicitation, it did indicate that there was $100,000 that could be allocated to the planning phase for Category 1. There's another question related to PMT, so I'm going to direct this to Gentry. Can more than one person within an agency receive a login for the performance measurement tool?
I'm not 100% sure on that answer, so I'm going to check. And if Michael could provide me with your email address, as soon as I get an answer, I'll just respond to you directly.
Great, thanks so much, Gentry. That will be really helpful, and I'm sure a question that'll come up for other sites. So another question that came through is, what is the timeline for budget approval process? So I know this is a common question for grantees. Nikisha, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'll take it. We cannot be actually specific on a timeline due to OCFO just does not review BJA budgets. They review budgets for the entire department within OJP. So we wouldn't know an actual timeline, but the best thing that you all can do is to start to reach out to myself and to reach out to Tracy to see if your budget has been approved or if it has even been reviewed.
This is Maria. This is a question maybe, Nikisha, you could clarify, but do JMHCP grant recipients, they receive that notification when the budget is approved. They receive that through GMS, correct?
Yes, they will receive an automated email from GMS letting them know that, like with any withholdings, like if the budget had been approved, that's why we ask that POC information is up to date and current, because that's who will receive the notices, the point of contact person, and the authorized official.
Right. Thanks, Nikisha, because oftentimes what we find is that the right person isn't receiving the right information. So that's why those updates and keeping the point of contact information current is so important for those notices in order for that person to respond to those notices in a timely manner, because as soon as there's any feedback on the budget, you'd want to sort of be able to respond to that quickly, turn it around, and then that's all the faster that the budget can be approved. So just wanted to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
And that actually leads into our next question quite well. So one of the grantees was wondering what the limited number of users in addition to the performance measurement tool was for the grants management tool. It's my understanding that the financial and the programmatic points of contact are able to log in, so that would be 2. Maria and Nikisha, is that correct for the limit for logins for grants management tool?
For the GMS,
yeah.
I won't limit it to just 2, because you can have multiple users as far as the financial points of contact. So I can't give a specific reason for GMS.
But it has to be one of the listed point of contacts on the grant, is that right?
Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again, Sarah.
I was just clarifying that. So if there's multiple, but it has to be one of the listed point of contacts on the grant to have the GMS login, is that correct?
Yeah.
Sorry, Maria, I think you were going to jump in as well.
Oh, sure. This is Maria. So what I was going to say is it might be beneficial to reach out with the help desk number on the last slide and call the GMS help desk and just ask about who can actually, register for GMS. Can there be multiple users? Does it have to be the financial point of contact, authorizing official, and point of contact that manages the program? So just a suggestion.
Yes, great. This will keep the slide up for a moment. The PMT Help Desk is a very helpful resource to everyone. And also for Grants Management Tool, there's another help desk number that you can call. So definitely jot these down, or we will follow up with this information too. How often is the grants financial training offered, and can you provide more detail about the training, such as the hours and the location for people?
Okay. This is Nikisha.
Yep, go ahead, Nikisha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As far as the grants financial management training, you would have to go onto the website. I don't think I saw it in one of the slides that we had, but it will be listed on your special conditions page. It should be special condition number between number 4 and 5 for the grants management training. You can go to see if they have any on-site classes available, but you can take the training online. So online is at your own pace. So again, like I said, you have 120 days from the award acceptance date to make sure that's completed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nikisha.
You're welcome.
Another question I think that's also for Nikisha is, how do you know if a vendor is considered a consultant and subject to the $81.25 per hour rate?
Can you repeat that again, sir?
Yes, absolutely. It was a nicely detailed question. So they're wondering is how do they know if a vendor is considered a consultant and subject to the federal hourly rate, which is $81.25 per hour?
Well, I guess it would be based off of the grantee, your consultant's background, as far as because most consultants know that they are consultants and they're coming to you and this is their hourly rate, which means that they have to have some type of documentation to back them up, letting them know that this is what they do charge, because they charge these services already for the same type of consulting work that they're going to do for you all. So they should be able to have some backup documentation for that.
Yeah, so this is Maria. I'll just add to that. Nikisha's definitely, she's on target there. So typically a consultant would be someone who's independent, who's expert, or not independent, but typically we see that they have a separate tax ID. They're an independent consultant. But as far as their rate goes, that's the maximum allowable rate for a consultant, the $81.25. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what should go in the budget, is because that's the maximum. That might not be the going rate for that service in that geographic area, or for that person or that particular service. And so typically if I see that it's in the budget, that it's maxed out, or they're requesting above the federal maximum, then I would ask for additional justification, like as far as going rate for that service, and maybe 3 quotes for that particular service. So it's not exactly a perfect science, but asking additional questions is always helpful.
Thanks so much, Maria and Nikisha. I think that additional clarification was helpful. It's complicated as you get a new award to wade through these challenges. The next question I think I'll be able to answer, and it is there a template for the planning and implementation guide? Yes, each grant category actually has a different planning and implementation guide, and we'll be sending you those updated versions prior to the December category-specific orientation webinars. So you can expect to get those at some time before those webinars. So really by the end of the month, we're hoping to provide those updated guides to you. The next question is, I think, about the planning phase for a Category 3 grantee. And, you know, it seems like they're unfamiliar with how this process works, and they're wondering, do they draw down the $150,000 up front, or is it reimbursable? Nikisha, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? That was a lot.
Yes, it was a very specific question. So I think what the grantee was getting at is that they have received a Category 3 award, which during the planning phase you can utilize up to $150,000, and they want to know how you actually do that. Do you draw down the $150,000 up front, or is it reimbursable? So how do they actually draw down funds?
Okay. Yeah, it will be reimbursable because you can't come in and draw down the whole 100 because it has to be expended within a certain amount of time. So when you're coming in to draw down anything, it should be all ready for projects that have taken place that need to be paid off right then and there. Because once you draw down, I think it's like a 48-hour window that you have. It's between either 48 or 72, and if you don't use the funds within that time, you have to send them back. And the funds won't be available to you if you have any pending withholding.
So this is Maria. So just to clarify, and Nikisha, please feel free to add. So it's basically you would, actually engage in the activity, and then in order to pay for that service of those hours, you would submit the required documentation, and you would draw down to be, it's on exactly as she said, on a reimbursement basis with the proper documentation, and it's per service or activity as you expend. It wouldn't be upfront. It would be as the program activities occur. That's it. Just wanted to add. Thanks.
Thank you. That's definitely helpful clarification, and certainly good for new grantees to understand the drawdown process, a common question. We have a follow-up on the consultant rate question, and the person is wondering if the consultant's rate included in the budget is over that federal rate and it gets approved by OCFO, does that mean the consultant's rate is approved?
Nikisha, you want to take that? Do you want me to take it?
Okay. You can go ahead. You can take it.
So I'm actually going to take a guess here. If OCFO has approved it, then it has already gone through myself and gone through the programs office, and then has gone to OCFO. So if you're approved, then of course you're approved. And if you have that in writing and it's gone back to you or to the financial point of contact through GMS and it's approved and you have that in writing, you're good to go. But I would just caution that anything above the federal financial rate does require additional justification. And if for whatever reason, you haven't heard from myself, you haven't heard from Nikisha, and somehow it's approved, I would probably... I might question that, but I don't see that happening. But it's yeah. So I would question that. I would just want to be double sure that that is okay.
Right, and typically you would provide justification potentially such as past billing at that rate from that consultant or that person or organization, or a letter with information support it. So you would actually need to justify the rate, right?
Right. You would need to justify it like that's a specific service needed in that specific area that might not, maybe the only way it can come to that to serve the target population is through that consultant, which is very limited. There would have to be really specific circumstances to go above the federal consultant rate.
Right.
Thank you so much. So last chance, if anyone has any questions, you can chat them into question and answer box at the bottom of right-hand screen. And I'll give about a couple seconds here for people to chat in any final questions they might have. And also, just as a reminder, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, we have a newsletter that has behavioral health information that's specific to Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program. So if you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe. In addition to our technical assistance to you all as grantees, as Maria mentioned, we also do technical assistance to the field as well. So lots of good information is shared through that. So I'm not seeing any further questions, so I want to once again thank so much our speakers, Nikisha, Maria, and Gentry, for a really helpful webinar, and say once again, congratulations to all the new grantees. We're really excited to work with you. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.